I don't look like JB, but I'll do my best to fill in for him. And today we're going to give you a little overview on the JPEG XS new profile coming, the TDC profile, and a little bit about implementing JPEG XS on software. We'll put a little bit of a couple slides here at the end about that as well. So just a quick reminder, what is JPEG XS all about, right? I mean, when we first started this, 2013, 2014 timeframe, the goal was to make a much simpler, less complex, ISO standard compliant, lightweight codec for uncompressed video. And the goal, and of course at that point, the main ones you had out there was JPEG 2000. And the goal was to save cost and power, preserve the quality, bring the latency down, ideally to no latency, so same thing you get with uncompressed video, and obviously manage more pixels. And a lot of what was driving this is going to 4K, 8K, and beyond. And in case anybody didn't know, XS stands for extra small and extra speed compression. That's where the XS came from. So the main objectives of the standard when it was created, one, of course, was visually lossless, constant quality, so constant bit rate, making it low power, low complexity, and I think the other key thing that really drove it is trying to get it across platforms. That was one of the struggles previously, was could you really do it in software? Could you do it CPU, GPU, ASIC, and FPGA? The goal is no latency. Obviously, it ended up being hundreds of microseconds, but left definitely less than 1 millisecond. And obviously, scalability up to 4K, 8K, and beyond, and anything that's going on in there, as well as making it an open standard. So to give you a little goals at the bottom, pretty much achieve the lossless quality, ultra low latency, so it's 32 lines, so you're talking definitely less than a millisecond in latency, and then low complexity. So here gives you a couple data points of what was implemented. So on the software side, could easily do 4K 60 on an Intel i7 processor, and hardware, if I'm not familiar with these families, the Arctic 7 is sort of the smallest end of the Xilinx range, and Cyclone 5 was the smallest end of the Intel range, and it was less than 50% of an Arctic 7 and 25% of a Cyclone 5. So the whole goal was to make sure it was very small on an FPGA as well. So in the media production, this is where we've been focused the last years, and both the LAN, getting this into the LAN, the WAN, and the cloud. That's a lot of the work that's been going on here at VSF, getting JPEG XS over RTP and transport stream, and supporting on the RTP side of things, supporting the 2110 efforts with -22, and of course the activities going on with IPMX. And then on the transport stream side, really leveraging the 2022-1 and 2, as well as SRT, RIST, other kinds of some of those proprietary protocols out there. All to get video over IP. The whole goal was to get everything moving over IP. So a lot of the interoperability that's out there has been achieved by actually following the VSF recommendations, such as on the TR08 for 21-22, but it's also being pulled into the ground to cloud, cloud to ground effort, as well as the TR10 activities for IPMX. And then on the TR07 side, because still going to want to support stuff over transport stream in WAN and contribution kind of modes. To be noted, you get all the capabilities and everything, configurations from the TR07 and TR08, but in storage applications, you can use JPEG XS and put it in MP4 or MXF kind of formats. And JPEG has obviously been starting to get used and starting to get some experience being used in protocols with RIST and SRT as well. So looking at one of the other key capabilities that maybe not everybody's fully aware of that you can do with JPEG XS is this multi-res scalability. So it has the ability to, depending on what your workload is, whether you're trying to do multi-viewers, video switchers, controllers, monitoring, all sorts of different applications, you can do these multi-res scalability where you can optimize the bandwidth of the network even further by going to one of these proxies, divide by 2, divide by 4 kind of proxy. And this obviously will reduce the amount of software load, hardware load requirements on your system. So just showing a couple examples here on the encode side where you can gracefully generate a proxy along with the full res excess. And then on the decode side, and if you can see there, it's probably a little hard to read down there, but the proxy, the full res one, like we're showing downstairs, was at 500 megabits per second, but the proxy there is 40 megabits per second at 1K. So you get a much lighter and smaller version if you need to, but you still keep all the resolution and scalability. And then on the decoder side, you can obviously pull out the full 4K image. You can do a divide by 2 and downscale that to a 2K image, or you can even do the proxy down to the 1K. So looking at a little bit of where the standard's at and where it's gone over the last 3-4 years, it's hard to believe we're actually already moving into the 3rd edition of JPEG XS. First one was back in that 2019 timeframe. So when you got your 444, 422, 400 support, it was visually lossless and constant bitrate. So we hit sort of the initial goals of the initial standard. And then the 2nd edition in 2022, we added in 420 support, added in a mathematically lossless mode as well at 12-bit for variable bitrate. And we added in the raw, or the JPEG standard added in the raw Bayer compression. I'm not trying to say Intupix did this, but the JPEG committee did. And then there was a little bit of influence there. There was an addendum put in that 2nd edition as well to handle some of the VSF and IPMX requirements, where they wanted a high 420 capability put into that for IPMX and TR08. And then basically to go from, when you're doing your compression, 24-bit, 30-bit, 36-bit, whatever you're starting with, you're compressing this down to 1.5 to 3 bits per pixel, but you have an upper limit as well. And so typically that's 6 bits per pixel is what's built into most of the encoders. And that's where basically the TR07 and 08 wanted to max that out at 4 bits per pixel because it'll reduce the size of the encoder a little bit when you do that. And now in the 3rd edition, we've added in a frame buffer. So this is now where you get inter and intra capability. So it's a compressed frame buffer, so it's not the whole frame, it's a compressed frame. And there's a refresh mechanism to keep the encoder and decoder synced. They're also going to add in mathematically lossless up to 16-bit as well in this 3rd edition as well. But the 3 out of the profiles that are out there, the 3 that are most relevant to the media production world is the high profile, which everybody's probably very familiar with at this point, and TDC, and then the raw Bayer, which is a big deal for obviously all the new sensors as they keep growing and getting bigger, and the camera makers and where they're headed. Really in that, when you look at TDC versus high profile, your latency doesn't change. You get the same latency through it, still very low latency. In high profile, really, the main focus was natural content. And when you go with the TDC profile, the main focus there is screen content. That's where you're seeing the significant, really almost a 50% bandwidth efficiency increase for screen content with the TDC profile. And so this is, of course, a very big deal in the Pro AV space for that static content. So this is the radar plot of the various encoding technologies out there, and really what you're getting here with the TDC profile is a little more, is that compression efficiency gain out there. Yeah, a little more complexity, so it drops a little bit on the complexity side, but it's primarily you're getting a significant coding efficiency gain with TDC profile. Getting into the eye chart of some of the details behind it, it's still wavelet-based prediction. There's still no motion compensation built into it. Keeps the complexity low, helps you really deliver that ultra-low latency that we have with the high profile, so no changes there. The main thing is adding in is the pink sections there in the drawing is what's been added in, and these are the compressed frame buffers. And so it's an encoder-driven frame buffer, and by making it compressed, one of the nice aspects is you get a 3 to 4x reduction on the memory size of that frame buffer, so it helps lower the power, lower the cost of that implementation. And then during the operation, you got a inter versus intra selection that's going on, a mix of the intra and inter modes in each frame. going through the prediction modes, and then the cyclic group refresher mechanism to keep the encoder and decoder synchronized. But as always, the other key point on that previous slide I probably forgot to highlight is that with JPEG, you can't leave anything else behind. You got to be backward compatible to all the previous stuff. Same thing here. I mean, if you've got a TDC profile running, it will see and accept a high profile stream coming at it. And one of the things when we did the high profile, is basically you can do image-to-image comparisons, and they really put a pretty stringent test on it that for making sure that you were truly lossless, and they call it the flicker test. So they give you the uncompressed and compressed, and they flicker it back and forth so you can see if there's any differences to try and really show people, is there any difference between is it truly lossless? Can you actually see any difference between the original and the compressed versions? And pretty much down to 3 bits per pixel, nobody can see anything. You literally can't see anything if it's at 3 bits per pixel. Get you about a 10-to-1 compression there. You can get visually lossless, so it's still very hard to see anything, at down to 1.5 bits per pixel, so you get closer to the 20-to-1 ratio. The other thing that comes with wavelet, just that second bullet there, is that you can encode, decode, encode, decode, encode, decode, and the PSNR never drops. It's just a flat line. You don't lose anything as you keep encoding and decoding the images. And then you're moving down to, obviously, sort of the bottom point of where really JPEG XS was designed to go to is about a half bit per pixel was the bottom end, where you don't see any blocking artifacts either. One of the things, when it does degrade, it becomes fuzzy. It doesn't do blocking. Now with the TDC profile, same thing, you get that same sort of transparency where you can't see any difference down to about 1.5 bits per pixel. So this is really where you're getting that 50% gain. Instead of 3 bits per pixel, now it's down to 1.5 bits per pixel. And that's anywhere from 20 to 36-to-1 kind of compression ratios on that static content. And it's, in this point, since it is more video and it's more of a trained eye kind of thing, not a image-to-image comparison, so there's no flicker test on this. And you can go down to about 0.8 bits per pixel, which is that 36-to-1 kind of ratio. Now getting to the numbers, sometimes it's always better to see, okay, what kind of data rates are we actually talking about here, depending on whether you're at 2.5 gig or 4.5 gig, whether you're 422 or 444 12-bit, all the way up to, when you're up to 8K, you're pushing either 40 up to 72 gigabits per second of uncompressed data. And then, so running it through JPEG XS with the TDC profile, it sort of gives you the range of what you're going to get down to. At that HD level, you're 150 to 400 megabits per second, 4K, 400 to 750, and then at 8K, 1.5 to 2.5 gigabits per second. So we always say in the pro AV world where they want to keep everything ideally in gigabit networks, maybe 10 gig networks, but you can really keep yourself in some of those lower networks with this compression. And then on top of that, you can do these proxies. If you needed to bring your data rates down, you want to do 4K, you can do 2K and bring down your rate, or down to 1K and bring the data rates down further. So now you get to the meat of it. Where are you seeing the blue line is going to be the high profile, and the orange line is the TDC profile. And the first one we're showing there really is desktop CGI content. So this is gaming, some sort of gaming environment. And of course, when you get static stuff where it's not moving very much, you're going to get a pretty significant. God, I can't even see the numbers up here. Yeah, so you go from about 45 up to 55 on when it's in that static content. So a pretty significant gain there. And then when you look at static natural content, where there's a lot of static movement or a static part of it, in this case I think it's the smoke view that we've got there, you're seeing a 2 to 3 dB gain in that kind of environment, or that kind of content. When you're looking at just true natural content, you'll see that it matches. It gives you the same performance as you would with high. And then the one on the right is a waterfall example where obviously the waterfall is moving, but the rest of it's not moving. And you're seeing a 2 to 3 dB gain in that kind of environment with the TDC profile too. But where you see the truly changing kind of gains is with the desktop content. So you at 1.5 bits per pixel, you're at about 35 PSNR, and that jumps all the way up to over 50 when you go to that desktop content. So this is clearly a 15 dB gain, is obviously substantial gain for that kind of content. And at 3 bits per pixel, it goes up 15 dB again. And I remember, Andrew mentioned yesterday that when you do move windows, you see the drop. That's what the one on the right is. You see the drop in performance when you move windows around a little bit. But even when you look at that, it's still a 5 dB gain above what the high profile is giving you for that desktop content. So it's still a significant gain even when you're moving some of the windows around and stuff like that. And then just a couple slides on what you can expect from the software side of performance with JPEG XS. Versus TDC versus JPEG XS high. So really what influences that most is these, in the wavelet compression, you're talking this vertical decomposition that's going on. And that's the biggest factor. And you'll see that with TDC and high profile, they use the same number of vertical decomposition. So you're going to be in the same kind of performance. And then what I'm showing down here at the bottom is an ideal encode decode implementation of JPEG XS. So obviously there's a lot of other factors that come with software that are sort of outside of control of the encoder. But if within the encoder space, it's about 20 lines. You need about 11 lines on the encoder side and 9 lines on the decoder side. So roughly your best case scenario is 20 lines plus a few cycles added in there, which is less than a line somewhere. Compute cycles, as JB explained it to me. It's like it's not a full line. It's just some extra processing cycles from the CPU. So one of the goals that we had in this whole process of doing TDC as well was to make sure we could still meet the initial target, which way back when, 2017, 2018, was that you could get TDC to achieve 4K 60 frames per second. At that time, it was a much newer i7 4-core processor, but we decided, okay, let's leave the target the same. Can we still achieve the goal on a Gen 8? So we're quite a few generations after that now, but on a Gen 8 i7, and yes, we can still achieve 4K 60 on that i7 Gen 4 or Gen 8 processor. And there is an impact. There's more processing going on there, so there's a little bit of performance, and it's about 20% high versus TDC. So TDC is about 20% lower. So to sort of summarize it, put it all back together. JPEG XS, still trying to maintain the same goals: low latency, low complexity, keeping the high quality, trying to improve the feature sets, as well as make sure it's working across all platforms, software and hardware, optimized for the multi-core environments you have in today's processors, but also make sure we still support FPGA, ASIC kind of opportunities as well. And so when you look at the TDC profile, significant improvement on the screen and desktop kind of content, and static natural content as well. And compared to high profile, there's a moderate increase in complexity, hardware and software. You gotta put that frame buffer in there. But there's zero increase in latency. The latency is exactly the same. The requires that compressed frame buffer. So by being a compressed frame buffer, you are saving 3 to 4x over an uncompressed frame buffer. And it performs very similarly as just on that other chart with static natural content or non-static natural content. It's same thing. It's going to be backwards compatible to decoder and encoder to the XS high profiles, and there's no impact on the 2110 or 2022-2 work that we've been doing over the last multiple years. And it'll be published here in 2024. The technical side is fixed. Part 1 is done. Part 2 and 3 are scheduled for publication. Should probably be in the spring timeframe. That's what they're targeting, is spring timeframe for 2 and 3. And then 4 and 5 will be in the second half of 24, and it'll be formally released to the market. There you go. Thank you.